Eleanor Mason floated in the healing pod, her body suspended in glowing blue liquid. The assassination attempt had nearly killed her. Laser burns covered her left side, and a poisoned dart had pierced her shoulder during the diplomatic reception. Any normal human would have died instantly, but Eleanor was not normal. Her eyes snapped open. The monitors around the pod beeped frantically as she pushed herself upright. The liquid drained away as the pod's clear cover slid open. "You shouldn't be moving yet," said John Miller, her aide, rushing to her side. "The medical system says you need at least 12 more hours." Eleanor ignored him. She touched her wounded side, and tiny sparks of silver light danced beneath her fingers. The burned flesh began to knit together. "He finally made his move," she said, her voice raspy from disuse. After all these months of smiles and false promises. John handed her a robe. "Lord Xorath has already announced to the Galactic Council that Earth's diplomat died in an unfortunate accident, a reactor malfunction in your quarters." His voice trembled. "They're preparing a state funeral." Eleanor laughed, a sound like old branches cracking in winter wind. How convenient. She walked barefoot to the center of her private chamber aboard the diplomatic vessel. To any outside observer, the ship appeared to be a standard Earth diplomatic cruiser. But those who knew where to look would notice oddities, how shadows sometimes moved against the light, how certain corridors seemed longer on the inside than their external dimensions would allow. Eleanor pressed her palm against a blank wall. A hidden compartment revealed itself, sliding open to display an ancient wooden box carved with symbols no human language had used for millennia. "It's time, isn't it?" John asked quietly. He had served Eleanor for 15 years, recruited when she found him, a homeless veteran with nowhere to go. He had seen enough to know his employer was not what she appeared. "Yes," Eleanor said simply. She opened the box and removed a small jar filled with dirt. Actual soil from Earth, from a specific forest that had been ancient when humans first learned to make fire. She uncorked the jar and breathed in the scent. Her back straightened. The last of her wounds vanished. "I have worn this diplomatic mask for too long," she said, "playing their games, pretending humans are just another weak species to be managed." She dipped her finger in the soil and drew a symbol on her forehead. The air around her shimmered. "The Galactic King thinks he knows what humans are. He's cataloged our weapons, our technologies, our biological weaknesses." A smile spread across Eleanor's face, transforming her features. Though she appeared no different physically, something fundamental had changed. Power radiated from her like heat from a fire. But there are older things in human blood. Things that were walking Earth when his ancestors were still swimming in primordial oceans. The ship's lights flickered. Through the viewport, the stars seemed to shift position, as if the vessel had jumped location without engaging engines. "What are your orders?" John asked, standing at attention. "First, we disappear," Eleanor said. "If Xorath believes I'm dead, let him celebrate briefly." She moved to the ship's control console and placed both hands on it. The conventional controls reconfigured, symbols appearing that weren't in any standard language. The engines made a sound unlike normal propulsion, a rhythmic thumping, like giant feet walking. "Then we gather what we need. There are others who will stand with us. Other humans who carry old powers in their blood. And non-humans who remember when my kind walked between worlds." On the bridge's main screen, an alert appeared. A hegemony battlecruiser was approaching their position, weapons charge. "And what about them?" John asked, nodding toward the screen. Eleanor's eyes glinted. For just a moment, they looked impossibly old. "They'll find nothing but empty space and bad dreams." She tapped a sequence on the transformed console. The ship shuddered, its outline becoming indistinct. Outside, the stars stretched and twisted as reality folded around them. On the bridge of the hegemony vessel, alarms blared as the Earth diplomatic ship simply vanished from all sensors. In his palace on the capital world, Lord Xorath received the news that the human diplomat ship had disappeared. A chill ran through his spine, as ancient instincts whispered warnings his rational mind couldn't comprehend. Eleanor's ship drifted silently through the void between star systems. To outside observers, it would appear as nothing more than space debris or a small asteroid. Inside, Eleanor sat cross-legged on the floor of her private chamber, eyes closed, mind reaching across vast distances. "Are you sure they can be trusted?" John asked, standing guard by the door. Eleanor opened one eye. No one can truly be trusted, but necessity makes strange allies. She returned to her trance state. In her mind, she traveled beyond normal space, through pathways only she could see. Her consciousness touched a rebel outpost on a frozen moon, orbiting a gas giant at the edge of hegemony space. Linda Summers felt the contact like a warm breeze in her cold command center. The former Earth general looked up from her tactical displays, instantly alert. "Someone's here," she whispered to her officers, who reached for weapons. "Peace, warrior." Eleanor's voice echoed in the room, though no speakers carried it. "I come seeking alliance, not conflict." A shimmer appeared in the center of the room, forming into a ghostly image of Eleanor. The diplomat. Linda lowered her weapon slightly. "We heard you were killed." "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Eleanor replied, "and orchestrated by Lord Xoreth himself." Linda's face hardened. "That matches our intelligence. His forces have increased patrols in this sector. Something has him worried." "He should be," Eleanor said. "I need your fighters, Linda, and your contacts across the frontier worlds." Linda studied the apparition carefully. "You're not just a diplomat, are you? There were always rumors about you back on Earth." Eleanor smiled. "We all wear masks. Mine has simply been worn longer than most." Across the room, an engineer looked up from his workstation. "General, I'm picking up unusual energy readings from this projection." "My methods are my own," Eleanor said, "but they will be effective against the hegemony if you join me." Linda considered for a long moment. "The hegemony killed my family when they took Mars Colony. I fought them for 20 years. She straightened her back. "What do you need from us?" Meanwhile, on another frontier world, Keith Douglas worked alone in his hidden workshop. Discarded hegemony technology littered the tables around him. His hands were blackened with grease as he assembled a device that combined Earth ingenuity with salvaged alien tech. A shadow fell across his workbench. Keith reached for the pistol at his side. "Your weapons disrupt their shield harmonics." Eleanor's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "Impressive work." Keith spun around, weapon raised. "Who's there?" Eleanor's form gradually appeared, translucent at first, then more solid. "Someone who appreciates your talents, Mr. Douglas." "How did you find me?" Keith demanded, not lowering his gun. "The same way I found General Summers. The same way I'll find others who will help us strike back at the hegemony." Keith's eyes narrowed. "You're her. The diplomat everyone says is dead." "Eleanor Mason, yes, though that name is merely one of many I've used." She approached his workbench, examining his inventions. "You've done remarkable work with limited resources. What do you want?" "To offer you better resources and a chance to use your creations against the ones who destroyed your home." Back on Eleanor's ship, her physical body remained motionless, but a slight smile formed on her lips. John watched nervously as strange energies crackled around her. "The network forms," Eleanor murmured, though her lips barely moved. "Old debts called in. Old promises remembered." John checked the ship's scanners. 3 hegemony patrol vessels have entered this sector. Should we move?" Eleanor's eyes opened. The silver light in them faded slowly back to normal. "No need. They won't see us." She stood, stretching like someone waking from a long sleep. "I've made contact with the first of our allies. Linda Summers will mobilize her resistance fighters. Keith Douglas will provide weapons. Will that be enough against the hegemony's forces?" Eleanor walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. "They are only the beginning. There are others I must reach, beings who owe me favors from centuries past. those who have watched and waited alongside humanity's journey to the stars. On the bridge of the lead hegemony patrol ship, an officer frowned at his sensor readings. "Sir, I thought I detected something unusual, but it's gone now." The captain grunted. "This region is known for sensor ghosts. Continue the search pattern." Neither noticed the brief shadow that passed across their view screen. A shadow shaped like a house on chicken legs. Lord Soreth paced the gleaming floor of his throne room. His long, slender fingers tapped against the ornate metal of his ceremonial armor. The windows showed the three suns of Xora's prime setting in sequence, bathing the room in shifting colors. "Impossible," he muttered. "No human could have survived that attack." Admiral Drake stood at attention, his gray skin pale with fear. Bringing bad news to the Galactic King often meant death. "The evidence is clear, Your Majesty," he said. "The Diplomat ship vanished from our sensors, but we detected an energy signature matching no known technology. Our scientists believe." "I know what your scientists believe." Soreth snapped. He stopped before a wall display showing hundreds of star systems. "They believe in ghost stories and myths. The precursor archives warned us about Earth," Drake said carefully, "about certain humans who carry old powers." Soreth turned, his eyes flashing. "Then find this human. Hunt her down before she can fully awaken whatever dormant abilities she possesses." He pressed a button on his throne. A holographic image appeared, Eleanor Mason's official diplomatic portrait. "I want hunter-killer vessels deployed immediately. Equip them with the magic dampening technology from the vault." Drake's eyes widened. "Those devices haven't been tested in actual." "Do it," Soreth roared. "If she is what I fear, we cannot afford to wait." Across the galaxy, Eleanor's ship appeared suddenly near an abandoned space station. The structure floated silently, its lights long dark, its communication arrays pointed uselessly into space. "This was once a hegemony research facility," Eleanor explained as she and John prepared to board. "Abandoned 50 years ago after an accident." John checked his oxygen mask. "What kind of accident?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "They were studying artifacts from Earth, things they didn't understand." They crossed the airlock into the dark station. Their flashlights revealed corridors covered in a strange, crystalline frost that shouldn't exist in the vacuum of space. "This way," Eleanor said, moving confidently through the darkness. They reached a sealed vault door. Eleanor placed her hand against it, whispering words in a language John didn't recognize. The frost across the door melted instantly, and the heavy metal slid open. Inside sat a single wooden chest, untouched by the frost that covered everything else. "What is it?" John asked. "A piece of me I left behind long ago." Eleanor opened the chest. Inside was a large mortar and pestle made of ancient wood, carved with the same symbols as the box on their ship. As she lifted it out, the mortar seemed to hum with energy. "With this, I can travel between stars without a ship," she explained. "In the old days, I used it to cross forests. The principle is the same, just a larger scale." A distant alarm sounded. John checked his comm device. Hegemony ships just appeared in the system. 3 hunter-killer vessels. Eleanor's expression hardened. Soreth isn't wasting time. She placed the mortar and pestle in her bag. "We need to leave. Now." As they raced back toward their ship, a blinding light filled the corridor. A boarding party of hegemony soldiers blocked their path, weapons raised. "Surrender in the name of the Galactic King," the leader ordered. Eleanor stepped forward, placing herself between the soldiers and John. "I remember when your king's ancestors begged at my door for scraps of knowledge," she said calmly. "How quickly they forget." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a handful of what looked like ordinary seeds. With a quick motion, she threw them toward the soldiers. The seeds sprouted instantly, growing into thick, twisted vines that wrapped around the soldiers' arms and legs. Their screams echoed through the station as the plants continued to grow, covering their armor. "Run," Eleanor told John. They made it back to their ship as more hegemony soldiers poured into the station. As their airlock sealed, John watched through a viewport as the entire research station began to change, its metal walls warping and shifting like something alive. "What did you do to them?" he asked. "Just a simple hedge maze," Eleanor replied, activating the ship's engines. "Though in space, with limited oxygen, they'll want to solve it quickly." The ship pulled away from the station, which now resembled a giant, twisted garden more than a space facility. On the lead hegemony vessel, Admiral Drake watched the transformation with horror. "Find her," he ordered his crew. "Whatever the cost, find that witch." Eleanor's ship drifted silently through an asteroid field, its strange energy signature masked by the mineral-rich rocks surrounding it. Inside, Eleanor studied a star map while John monitored communications from across the galaxy. "The hegemony has put a massive bounty on information about us," John reported. "Every mercenary and bounty hunter in the galaxy will be looking for this ship." Eleanor nodded absently, her focus on the map. "We need to recover more of my artifacts. They're scattered across worlds now controlled by the hegemony." She pointed to a glowing dot on the map. "This is New Terra Colony. The humans there have a museum of Earth artifacts. Among them is my comb." "A comb?" John raised an eyebrow. "Not just any comb," Eleanor explained. "In the old days, I would throw it behind me to create forests that my pursuers couldn't pass through. Now it might create something far more useful." Their ship changed course, its movements unlike any conventional vessel. Instead of smooth acceleration, it seemed to hop through space in strange, lurching motions. On New Terra Colony, Susan Baker carefully cleaned a display case in the Museum of Earth Heritage. The small museum housed artifacts brought from Earth during the first colonial expansions. As the museum's curator, Susan had always been fascinated by the folklore attached to many of these items. She paused before a simple wooden comb displayed in a glass case. The plaque described it as ancient Slavic folk art, circa 1600 CE. But Susan knew there was something more to it. She had spent years researching connections between Earth folklore and unexplained phenomena throughout human-settled space. Her research assistant, Peter, rushed into the room. "Dr. Baker, you need to see this." He held out a data pad showing security alerts from the colony's defense grid. "Hegemony warships just entered orbit. They're demanding access to the museum." Susan's heart raced. "Lock down the artifact vault. Now." Peter hurried away while Susan moved to a computer terminal. She quickly typed in a series of commands, activating hidden security measures she had installed years ago. The museum lights dimmed as emergency power took over. Susan grabbed a small bag and moved toward the display with the comb. As she reached for the case, the museum's main doors burst open. Admiral Drake entered, flanked by armed soldiers. "Dr. Susan Baker," he said, "I'm told you're the foremost expert on Earth folklore in this sector." Susan straightened her back, trying to appear calm. "I'm just a museum curator." Drake approached slowly. "We both know that's not true. Your papers on the mythological significance of certain Earth artifacts have been quite illuminating." He gestured to his soldiers, who spread out through the museum. "We're looking for items connected to a particular Earth legend. One about a witch who lived in a moving house." Susan's expression didn't change, but her heart pounded harder. "Baba Yaga, a character from Slavic folklore." "Yes," Drake said. "We have reason to believe some artifacts connected to this folklore may have real power. Power that poses a threat to galactic security." Outside the museum, a small shape appeared in the sky above the colony. Eleanor's ship descended quickly, landing on the museum's roof with barely a sound. Eleanor and John climbed out, moving toward a maintenance entrance. "The comb is in the main exhibition hall," Eleanor whispered. "I can feel it calling to me." Inside, Drake was examining the comb's display case. "This item matches the description in our database. Secure it." As a soldier reached for the case, the museum's lights went out completely. When emergency lighting activated seconds later, Eleanor stood in the center of the room. "That belongs to me," she said simply. Drake's eyes widened with recognition. The Diplomat. So the king was right. Eleanor smiled coldly. The king knows very little, or he would never have tried to kill me. Drake drew his weapon. Surrender now. This facility is surrounded. Is it? Eleanor asked. She reached out her hand, and the glass case containing the comm shattered. The wooden comm flew into her palm. Susan Baker stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. You're really her, aren't you? The one from the stories. Eleanor nodded to Susan. The stories remember only fragments. The truth is much older. Drake signaled his soldiers to attack. Take her down. Eleanor drew the comb through her hair once, and then threw it toward the advancing soldiers. Where it landed, massive trees erupted from the museum floor, their branches twisting and growing at impossible speed, forming a dense wooden wall between Eleanor and the hegemony forces. Chaos filled the museum as trees continued to grow, breaking through the ceiling and walls. Eleanor grabbed Susan's arm. Come with us if you want answers, she said. Susan looked back at her life's work being destroyed, then nodded quickly. Lead the way. Eleanor, John, and Susan raced through the twisting wooden maze that had once been the museum. Behind them, they could hear Drake shouting orders as his soldiers tried to cut through the trees with energy weapons. They reached the roof where Eleanor's ship waited. As they boarded, Susan gasped at the interior, which seemed much larger than the outside suggested. Dimensional folding, she whispered, just like in the stories. Eleanor moved to the control console. We need to leave. Quickly. The ship rose from the roof just as hegemony fighters appeared in the sky above the colony. Energy blasts streaked past them, but Eleanor's vessel moved in impossible patterns, jumping and shifting in ways that defied physics. Once they reached space, Susan approached Eleanor. I studied the Baba Yaga legends all my life. I always believed there was truth behind them. Eleanor studied her with ancient eyes. What else have you learned in your studies? Susan hesitated, then retrieved a data pad from her bag. I've been translating pre-hegemony texts. They mention why certain species fear Earth so much. She showed Eleanor the screen. They encountered beings like you before. Eleanor's expression darkened as she read the text. The primal ones, she murmured. That's what they called us. John looked over her shoulder. What does it say? Susan explained. 10,000 years ago, Lord Soreth's species, the Torians, encountered powerful entities they called the primal ones. These beings nearly destroyed their civilization. The Torians built their entire technology around detecting and neutralizing this type of power. Eleanor nodded slowly. That explains why Xoreth tried to kill me specifically. His scanners must have detected traces of my true nature. She turned to John. Contact Linda and Keith. We need to meet immediately. This changes everything. On the Hegemony flagship, Drake stood before a holographic projection of Lord Xoreth, head bowed in shame. She escaped with the artifact, Your Majesty, and she's growing stronger. Soreth's projection flickered with rage. You had one task, Admiral. There's more, Drake continued. She took Dr. Susan Baker with her, the human researcher who specializes in Earth legends. Soreth went still. This is worse than I feared. Baker's research came dangerously close to rediscovering secrets we've worked for centuries to bury. He paced within the projection field. My ancestors faced extinction at the hands of such beings. They devoted their lives to creating safeguards against their return. Drake looked up. What exactly are we fighting, my lord? Soreth's eyes narrowed. Before humans called her Baba Yaga, before she took the form of a witch in a walking hut, she and her kind were known by other names. The Ancient Ones, the Shapers, beings who could bend reality to their will. He pressed a button, and a new image appeared, a massive device shaped like a ring. There is one weapon that might still work against her kind, the null ring. It was designed to sever the connection between our dimension and the sources of their power. Where is this weapon? Drake asked. hidden in the most secure vault on Taurus Prime. Bring her to me, Admiral. Lure her to the capital if you must. Drake bowed. As you command. Meanwhile, Eleanor's ship arrived at a hidden asteroid base where Linda Summers and her rebel forces had gathered. Keith Douglas was already there, his workshop filled with modified weapons based on his reverse-engineered hegemony technology. As they docked, Eleanor felt a strange sensation, a distant pull, like something calling to her from across the galaxy. He's activated the null ring, she whispered, her face pale. What's the null ring? John asked. Eleanor's eyes reflected distant stars. A weapon created long ago to kill my kind. I thought they had all been destroyed. Linda approached, her face grim. We've intercepted hegemony communications. They're falling back to Taurus Prime, pulling all their forces to the capital. It's a trap, Keith said. Eleanor nodded. Yes, but one we must spring if we are to end this. She turned to her growing band of allies. The time has come to tell you the full truth about what I am, and why Xorith fears me so much. Eleanor stood before her allies in the asteroid base's main chamber. Linda's resistance fighters, Keith's engineers, and various representatives from worlds oppressed by the hegemony gathered around her. What I am about to tell you has been hidden for millennia, Eleanor began. Before humans built cities, before we made tools of metal, there were beings who walked between worlds. Your ancestors called us gods, spirits, demons, many names across many cultures. She paced the room, her steps echoing. I was born human, but chosen to carry an ancient power. In each generation, this power finds a new vessel. I am the current Baba Yaga, but I am not the first. Susan stepped forward. The texts I translated suggest the Xorians encountered your kind on their homeworld long ago. Eleanor nodded. Yes, before they became the hegemony, the Xorians were a simple species. My kind visited many worlds, teaching and sometimes testing the beings we found there. She waved her hand, and a glowing image appeared above them, a planet with 3 suns. The Xorians failed their test. They tried to steal our power, to use it for conquest. They nearly destroyed themselves in the attempt. Keith frowned. What was the test? To see if they could wield power without being corrupted by it. Eleanor said sadly, the survivors built their entire civilization around preventing our return. Their technology is specifically designed to detect and neutralize what they call reality distortion, what humans once called magic. John looked troubled. But why target Earth specifically? Because human bloodlines carry dormant traces of our power, Eleanor explained. Not just mine, but many others from Earth's legends. The hegemony has been systematically hunting down and eliminating humans with potential for generations. The room fell silent as her words sank in. Linda broke the silence. So what's our plan? We can't hide forever. Eleanor moved to a star map. Nexus Station. It's a major transportation hub connecting all hegemony territories. We will make our stand there. Keith objected. That's suicide. Nexus Station has the heaviest defenses in the galaxy outside of Taurus Prime itself. Eleanor smiled, and for a moment, they all saw something ancient in her eyes, which is why they won't expect us to attack it. Plans were made quickly. Linda's fighters would create diversions in nearby systems. Keith's engineers would modify their ships with technology designed to confuse hegemony sensors. Eleanor would use her recovered artifacts to give them the edge they needed. 3 days later, a fleet of mismatched vessels approached Nexus Station. The massive structure filled their view screens, a wheel-shaped station with spokes extending to docking ports where hundreds of ships arrived and departed daily. Hegemony Control is hailing us, John reported from the communications console. Ignore them, Eleanor said. She held her mortar and pestle in one hand, her comb in the other. Everyone, prepare for boarding. On the station, Admiral Drake watched the approaching fleet with satisfaction. The witch took the bait, he said to his officers. All units prepare to engage. Activate the magic dampening fields. A hum filled the station as hidden technology came to life. Drake smiled coldly. Now we'll see how powerful she really is without her tricks. Eleanor's ship led the attack, moving in impossible patterns that confused the station's targeting systems. As they neared the main docking bay, hegemony battleships moved to intercept them. "We're surrounded," Linda shouted over the comlink. "Good," Eleanor replied calmly. She placed her mortar on the floor of the bridge and stepped inside it, an impossibly small space that somehow contained her. She began grinding the pestle in a circular motion, whispering words in a forgotten language. The space around their fleet seemed to ripple and fold. Suddenly, their ships were inside the station's perimeter, past the defensive line. Drake stared in disbelief at his tactical display. Impossible. How did they bypass our shields? On the station's security feeds, chaos erupted as Eleanor's allies poured from their ships. But the strangest sight was the corridors themselves. They began to shift and change, turning into wooden hallways that resembled the inside of a forest cavern. "What is happening to my station?" Drake demanded. A junior officer looked up from his console, face pale. "Sir, the internal sensors show the station's layout is changing. Security teams are reporting they keep ending up back where they started." Outside the command center, Eleanor walked calmly through the transformed corridors. Station security forces ran past her repeatedly, trapped in loops of her creation. "The station is mine now," she whispered, her voice somehow carrying to every corner of the massive structure. "Surrender, Admiral Drake, and I might let your forces leave alive." Admiral Drake's command center became an island of technology in a sea of living wood. Outside, the station continued its transformation. Walls became rough-hewn logs, metal floors turned to packed earth, and strange glowing mushrooms replaced the emergency lighting. "Sir, we've lost contact with 70% of our forces," a communications officer reported. Drake gripped the edge of his command console. "What about the magic dampening field?" "Still active, but it's having minimal effect." The officer looked up with fear in his eyes. "It's like she's changing the rules of reality faster than our technology can respond." Drake opened a channel to Xora's Prime. "My lord, we have engaged the witch at Nexus Station, but our defenses are failing. Request immediate reinforcements." Lord Xorath's face appeared on screen, his expression dark. "You were supposed to capture her, not engage in open battle." "She came prepared, my lord, with allies and power we didn't anticipate." Xorath leaned closer to the camera. "Hold the station at all costs. I am activating the full null ring. If it works, her power will vanish instantly." The connection cut off. Drake turned to his officers. "Prepare for close combat. We hold this room until reinforcements arrive." Meanwhile, Eleanor walked through the transformed station, John and Linda at her side. Station personnel they encountered either surrendered immediately or fled in terror. "The command center is ahead," Linda said, checking a station map on her device. "Heavily fortified." Eleanor nodded. "Drake is there. I can feel his fear." John looked around nervously. "Something feels wrong. This was too easy." "Not easy," Eleanor corrected. "They're waiting for something." She paused, closing her eyes. "Xorath is planning something big. A last resort." She turned to Linda. "Take your fighters and secure the docking bays. We'll need a quick escape route." Linda nodded and moved away with half their force. Eleanor continued toward the command center with the rest. On Xora's Prime, Lord Xorath stood in a massive underground chamber. In the center floated a giant ring made of dark metal, covered in symbols similar to those on Eleanor's artifacts. Scientists and technicians worked frantically at control panels surrounding it. "The null ring is at 70% power, my lord," the chief scientist reported. "At full power, it will create a field that extends throughout the hegemony, cutting off all connections to the source of her power." Xorath watched the ring begin to spin faster and faster. "How long until full power?" 20 minutes, my lord." Begin the countdown. Back at Nexus Station, Eleanor and her forces reached the sealed doors of the command center. Keith examined the locking mechanism. Standard hegemony security. I can bypass it, but it will take time. Eleanor placed her hand against the door. Stand back. The metal began to glow red, then white-hot. It didn't melt but simply dissolved away, revealing Drake and his officers inside, weapons ready. That's far enough. Which, Drake said. Eleanor stepped forward. This is your final chance to surrender, Admiral. Drake smiled coldly. In a few minutes, your power will be gone. Our king has activated the null ring. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly, the first sign of concern she had shown. So that's what I've been feeling. A pulling sensation, like the universe itself is being strained. She turned to John. We don't have much time. Drake raised his weapon. You have no time at all. Energy blasts filled the room as the hegemony forces opened fire. Eleanor raised her hand, and the blasts froze in midair, hovering like deadly fireflies. I am not just Baba Yaga, she said, her voice changing, deepening with power. I am what was before names, before stories, before your kind learned to speak. The frozen energy blasts dissolved into harmless light. Eleanor approached Drake as his officers fell back in terror. You hunted me across the stars, she said. Now you will take me to your king. Drake's weapon clattered to the floor. You want me to take you to Xoros Prime, to the heart of the hegemony. Eleanor smiled, and it was not a kind expression. Yes, because that's where this ends. That's where it always had to end. She turned to her allies. Prepare the fleet. We leave immediately for Xoros Prime. On the distant capital world, the null ring spun faster, its dark energy beginning to spread throughout the galaxy. Eleanor's fleet approached Xoros Prime, the gleaming capital world of the hegemony. Massive defense platforms orbited the planet, and hundreds of warships formed a protective barrier. At the center of the fleet was the royal flagship, a vessel 10 times larger than any other. In the lead ship, Eleanor stood on the bridge with John, Linda, Keith, and Susan. Admiral Drake sat nearby, a prisoner of war now forced to guide them. The null ring is almost at full power, Eleanor said, her voice strained. I can feel it pulling at my connection to the source. Susan studied the data on her screen. According to these readings, the ring is creating a field that's spreading through normal space. But your power comes from outside normal space, right? Eleanor nodded. From the places between worlds. The old places that existed before this universe took its current form. John looked worried. Can you counter it? Not alone, Eleanor said. She turned to Drake. Open a channel to your king. Drake hesitated, then complied. The massive view screen flickered, and Lord Xoreth appeared, his face twisted with rage. So you come to your doom willingly, he said. How convenient. Eleanor stepped forward. This conflict is unnecessary, Xoreth. It has always been unnecessary. Your kind nearly destroyed my ancestors. Xoreth snarled. We will not give you the chance to finish what you started. Your ancestors tried to steal power they didn't understand. Eleanor replied calmly. The consequences were of their own making. She spread her hands. I came to your galaxy as a diplomat. I still come seeking peace. Xoreth laughed bitterly. Peace, while you transform my stations and turn my soldiers into playthings for your magic. Only after you try to kill me, Eleanor reminded him. Last chance. Xoreth, shut down the null ring. Meet with me to discuss terms for true peace between our peoples. Xoreth's eyes narrowed. I would rather destroy my entire empire than surrender to your kind again. He cut the transmission. Eleanor turned to her allies. We need to move now, before the ring reaches full power. Linda, your fighters will create a distraction. Keith, your technology may still work when my magic fails. The fleet scattered, following their planned strategy. Small fighter craft darted between the hegemony warships, drawing their fire while Eleanor's main vessel slipped through the chaos, heading directly for the planet's surface. "They're not shooting at us," John observed as they descended. Eleanor's face was grim. "They want us to land. Soreth wants me close to the null ring when it activates." Their ship touched down near the royal palace, a towering structure of crystal and metal. As they prepared to disembark, Eleanor gathered her allies. "Listen carefully," she said. "When the ring reaches full power, I may be temporarily weakened. But remember, there are other forces at work here." She turned to Susan. "You understand what must be done." Susan nodded, clutching a small pouch Eleanor had given her earlier. They stepped onto the soil of Xoros Prime. The palace gates opened, revealing Lord Xoreth himself, surrounded by elite guards. Behind him, visible through the palace's transparent walls, was the massive null ring, spinning faster and faster. "Welcome to your end, witch," Xoreth said. "In 2 minutes, the ring will reach full power. Your magic will be gone forever." Eleanor walked forward alone. "You still don't understand what I am, do you? You think I'm just some human with borrowed power." She stopped before him. "I am Baba Yaga. I was ancient when your ancestors crawled from the seas. I have died and been reborn 1,000 times." Xoreth sneered. "Pretty words, but soon they will be all you have left." The null ring began to glow with blinding light. A wave of energy pulsed outward, washing over them all. Eleanor staggered, falling to one knee. Xoreth approached, triumph on his face. "See, you are nothing without your power." Eleanor looked up at him, and surprisingly, she smiled. "I never said all my power came from magic." She rose slowly to her feet as her allies moved into position around the palace grounds. Susan opened the small pouch, sprinkling its contents, ordinary earth soil, in a circle around them. "Humanity didn't just carry magic in their blood," Eleanor said. "They carried something far more dangerous, something your kind never understood." "What is that?" Xoreth asked, suddenly uncertain. "The ability to change, to adapt, to find new ways when old ones fail." Eleanor's eyes gleamed not with magic, but with intelligence and determination. "Your ancestors failed their test, not because they wanted power, but because they couldn't imagine power taking any form but their own." Around them, Linda's fighters began landing. Keith's engineers activated devices that disrupted the palace's defenses using purely technological means. And from Eleanor's ship, something emerged. A house walking on chicken legs, but made of metal and circuits as well as wood and bone. "This ends today," Eleanor said, "not with magic against technology, but with understanding against fear."